Hello, just when you thought it might be safe to go outside, we're starting a new unit. The new unit is called Work, Energy, and Simple Machines. Let's take this with just work first. A lot on the board behind me. Work is very simple. It's force times distance. We worked with forces, chapters 3, 6, and 7. We also worked with forces in momentum. Momentum equals force times time. This is force times distance, work, mechanical energy. Force times distance, mechanical energy. Now, many of you have a hard time with unit labels. Let's do a dimensional analysis exercise. Now, dimensional analysis is not canceling unit labels. Dimensional analysis is exactly what it says. Dimensional analysis, analyzing dimensions. The dimensions are actually the unit labels. It's a fancy way of saying unit labels. Unit label analysis, dimensional analysis, same thing. Now, what are the unit labels for force? Newton, easy. Think of the cookie. Well, what's force? Mass times acceleration. Well, force is newtons or kilogram meters per second squared. Okay. What's distance? Meters. Okay, now let's look at it. Work is force times distance. Okay. This is what force is. Mass times acceleration, kilogram meters per second squared, times meters. Kilogram meters per second squared times meters is going to be kilogram meters squared per second squared. Sounds kind of funny, doesn't it? Kilogram meters squared per second squared. Well, you can either say that that's Newton meter, force times distance. Okay, we can say that, Newton meter. And I'll say that a lot in class, Newton meter. How many Newton meters is that? Newton meter. So I could say Newton meter, Newton times meters. Or you hopefully have heard the term joule. Joule is named after a scientist with the last name Joule. So joule is not like a ruby, diamond. It's named after a scientist named Joule. And we'll talk about that scientist. There was also a scientist named Celsius, Fahrenheit, and Kelvin. These aren't made up names. These are named for people. So joule, excuse me, joule. A joule is a Newton meter or kilogram meter squared per second squared. Okay, easy? You got to imprint that on your brain, otherwise we're not going to do well. All right, is that okay? Kilogram meter squared per second squared. All units of energy, mechanical energy, Mechanical energy is measured in joules. Heat energy is measured in calories. Mechanical energy is measured in joules. Chapter 9 is mechanical energy. Let me say that again. Mechanical energy. When you think of mechanics, you think of movement, motion, and forces. The marriage of motion and force is really mechanics. Mechanical energy. You think of movement, forces. A motor is, you think of movement and forces. That's energy. That's work. If I walk across the room, my weight times the distance. Okay, so please. Mechanical energy is the energy of motion, where there are forces and motion involved. If something's in motion, it's no longer at rest. If something's in motion, it had a force applied to it. If it's a constant velocity, it had a force applied to it, accelerated it, it's a constant velocity. So there was a force there somewhere. Okay, enough said. Work, mechanical energy. Work, mechanical energy. Work, mechanical energy. Force times distance. Kilogram meters per second squared times meters. Kilogram meters squared per second squared. Newton meters. Newton times meters, joules. Okay? Now, there are two types of mechanical energy. There are kinetic energy and potential energy. You really don't think of that maybe when you learned kinetic energy last year in chemistry. I'm not quite sure they taught you correctly. Well, they may have. Chemistry teachers are so overwhelmed with teaching the mole, and it's a hard course of study. Forgive them. They're great teachers, especially here at this school. But kinetic energy is the energy of motion. Oh, motion! I get it. Motion. Wait a second, hold it. Motion. Motion in forces. Kinetic energy. Energy of motion. Mechanical energy. Mechanical energy, potential energy. The potential to do work. Potential energy is defined as the potential to do work. The potential to go a distance as a result of a force being applied. So, two types, mechanical energy, kinetic energy, and potential energy. Something else we're going to see a lot of. We're going to see a lot of the term power. Power. Now, if you have bulbs at home, especially the old-fashioned ones, see if there's one in the closet. Don't touch one if it's in a lamp. They get very hot, so don't do that. You'll burn yourself. But if there's one in the closet, or even the eco-friendly bulbs still have a rating for power. Power is watts. Watts. Power. Work over time. Joules per second. Work over time. Joules per second. Watts. The symbol for watts is capital W. Where does the word watt come from? Well, there was a guy named Watt. That's where the name came from. He did work with motors, engines, things like that. So we'll talk about him too as well. So, question for your consideration. If you walk a mile or run a mile, if you walk a mile or run a mile, what takes more energy? If you walk a mile or run a mile, what takes more energy? Walk or run a mile, what takes more energy? Okay, and I'm going to answer that question when I come back. See if you can answer that too, based on what we just discussed. Energy is force times distance. Be right back.